Question I get asked all the time is, what is the highest price house I can afford to buy? But that is the wrong question because I can't answer it and nobody can answer it. And I'm going to explain why. You see, when someone's getting qualified for a mortgage, we're not necessarily looking at the house price, but we're looking at the housing payment that they can qualify for. And there's a couple different factors that go into that. One is we have to consider what the debt to income ratio limits are on the program that they are applying for. There are two different debt to income ratio limits that we are looking at. One is called the front end or the housing ratio. The housing ratio looks at what the proposed housing payment would be as a percentage of the borrower's gross monthly income. The second ratio is the back end or total debt ratio. That ratio measures the proposed housing payment plus every other monthly debt and combines them all together and looks at that as a percentage of the gross monthly income. We're not looking at things like utility bills or cell phone bills or things like that. Only debts, loans, obligations that they have, not your regular monthly expenses. Then we have to determine what the housing expenses will be. And there are several factors that go into what that housing expense is. First is your principal and interest payment. So basically what the loan payment is on your mortgage. Then you have things like your property taxes, your home insurance. If you're in a flood zone, you will need flood insurance. If you're applying for a loan that has some kind of mortgage insurance, that has to be factored in as well. And even things like HOA fees, those are factored in also because those are obligations that you will have as a condition of owning that property. So let's walk through an example so you can see how all this stuff fits together and why it matters. Let's say you have someone wanting to buy a house, they make $60,000 a year. That's $5,000 a month. And let's say the program they're applying for allows for a maximum housing payment ratio of 33%. So no more than 33% of their gross monthly income can be allocated towards a housing payment. 33% of 5,000 is $1,650. So the housing payment cannot be more than $1,650 a month. Let's say the same program has a maximum total debt ratio or back end ratio of 45%. So the housing payment of $1,650 plus all their other debts cannot equal more than 45% of that $5,000 a month. So 45% of 5,000 is $2,250. Now, let's say this future home buyer goes out this weekend and looks at 3 properties listed for sale. Each one of them is listed for $250,000. Let's say this buyer also has enough for 20% down payment. First property they look at, we can pull the tax records and see that the annual tax expense on that property is $1,400. We also do some homework up front to find out that the home insurance on the property is going to be $2,000. When you calculate the loan payment and then add the monthly expenses for taxes and insurance, total obligation on that property is $1,647 a month. So just under that $1,650 limit. So they're good. The next house they see is also listed for $250,000. All the taxes on that property, they're also $1,400. We get an estimate for the home insurance on that property, but insurance on that property is going to be $5,000 per year. So now the housing obligation on that property, also for $250,000, jumps up to almost $1,900 a month. That's way over our limit. They won't qualify for that home. House number 3 that they look at, it is a townhome, $250,000. They look at the taxes. Taxes are a little bit cheaper. Let's say taxes are only $1,200 in this property. We get an insurance quote. Insurance is a little cheaper. Insurance is only $1,800 in this property. So things are looking good. However, since it's a townhome, there's HOA fees. Those HOA fees are $150 a month. So on the same property for $250,000, now the total housing expense is $1,650. That's over our budget. So as you can see, 3 separate properties have 3 totally different payment obligations tied to them, and that can make a difference between being able to qualify and not being able to qualify. So remember this, if you're looking for a home, the question to ask is not what is the highest price home I can qualify for, it's what is the highest payment that I can qualify for. And once we know that payment limit, we can kind of set a ballpark of a price range that would be appropriate for you to look at. And for some people, that maximum amount of a payment they can qualify for may be way more than they're even comfortable looking at. So by default, they're going to be looking for houses a lot cheaper than that and aren't going to have issues qualifying. For some people, what they're looking to qualify for might be right at that limit. In cases like that, you need to make sure ahead of time you identify what the property taxes will be, what the insurance will be, if there are other types of insurance that are required, and if there's any HOA fees that need to be disclosed up front so we know that you're going to be within your range for getting approved. You want to communicate closely with your loan officer, your realtor, and your insurance agent to make sure you have all the correct and accurate numbers so you can be better prepared to make offers on a home.